The story follows a simple fisherman named Eric. Every day, just like always, he takes his small boat out into the open sea to catch fish and make a living. For him, it's just another ordinary day on the water. But that day, something very strange begins to happen. Even though the weather is completely clear, within just a few minutes, a thick fog suddenly spreads across the entire sea. The visibility drops to almost nothing, and Eric quickly realizes that he has lost his direction. While trying to figure out where he is, Eric suddenly notices something unusual floating in the distance, an old, abandoned-looking ship. Curious and slightly worried, he slowly moves his boat closer and ties it to the side of the mysterious vessel. Thinking someone might still be inside, he decides to step aboard and check. But the moment he enters the ship, a chilling feeling runs through his body. The entire vessel is completely empty. There are no voices, no footsteps, no movement at all. Just an eerie silence that feels almost unnatural. The strangest part is that everything on the ship looks perfectly normal. Food is still sitting on tables. The dishes are clean. Clothes are neatly placed in their spots. In many places, it looks as if someone had been there just a few minutes ago. But now, no one is there. Trying to stay calm, Eric attempts to start the ship's engine, but it refuses to respond. Now, he begins to feel uneasy. Finding a massive empty ship in the middle of the ocean is already disturbing enough. He grabs a pair of binoculars and scans the surrounding sea, hoping to see another boat or some sign of help. But the fog is so thick that nothing is visible. Left with no other option, Eric heads to the control room and tries using the radio to call for help. He sends out a message explaining that he's stranded on a ship in the middle of the ocean and asks anyone listening to respond. After sending the message, Eric walks back onto the deck so he can return to his own boat. But the moment he looks down, his face turns pale. His small fishing boat is gone. Just minutes ago, it had been tightly tied to the ship, but now it has completely disappeared. Even stranger, the heavy fog that surrounded the ship just moments earlier has suddenly vanished, and the sky is now perfectly clear. It's already midday. Eric can't understand what just happened. Using the navigation maps, he tries to figure out where exactly he is. But one thing becomes clear very quickly. Without fixing the engine, escaping from this place will be impossible. Eric begins searching the ship for tools. After hours of work, he finally manages to repair the engine. For a moment, it feels like a huge relief, but the problems are far from over. He tries contacting someone through the radio again, yet once more, no response comes. Exhausted, Eric walks back onto the deck. Suddenly, he realizes he needs to use the bathroom. Since no one is around, he decides to simply stand near the edge of the ship. But just as he leans over the railing, something suddenly pushes him. Hard. Slowly, with great effort, he climbs back on board. Shaken but alive, Eric heads down toward the bathroom, but suddenly the door slams shut behind him. At first, he assumes the wind must have done it. However, when he tries to open the door again, he realizes something terrifying. The door is locked from the outside. Eric's breathing becomes heavy. Panic begins to set in. He tries everything to open the door, even using a coin from his pocket to force the lock. Nothing works. Now he is completely certain. He is not alone on this ship. Something, or someone, is here with him. Even though he cannot see it, he can feel its presence watching him, as if an unseen force is deliberately playing with him. Desperate, Eric shouts loudly, begging whoever is there to open the door. But the ship answers him with nothing but silence. What he sees there sends chills down his spine. Blood stains. He grabs a pair of scissors and tries to force another door open. Suddenly, the entire ship begins shaking violently. It feels as if something massive is about to happen. Eric runs upstairs and looks out of a window, and what he sees freezes him in place. A gigantic cargo ship is heading straight toward him. At this speed, the two ships are about to collide. Eric quickly realizes that if the collision happens, he will not survive. He desperately tries to get the other ship's attention. He removes his shirt and waves it wildly in the air. But the massive cargo ship never notices him. Now, he has only one option left: stop the ship somehow. Suddenly, Eric notices a long rope hanging near the window. A risky idea forms in his mind. He ties the rope and throws it into the water, hoping it might slow the ship down. But instead, the situation becomes even worse. The rope gets caught in the ship's engine blades and is violently pulled inward, wrapping tightly around Eric's neck. The sudden force begins choking him. His breathing stops as the rope tightens around his throat. In the final seconds, Eric manages to grab a tool and cut the rope just in time, collapsing onto the deck while gasping for air. His neck turns completely red from the pressure. He was only seconds away from dying. But the danger isn't over, because at that exact moment, the cargo ship finally crashes directly into the vessel. The impact is devastating. The entire ship shakes violently, When Eric finally regains consciousness sometime later, he finds himself back in the bathroom. But this time, something is even more terrifying. The room is filling with water. But the most disturbing part is this. The water isn't salty like ocean water. It's fresh, clear, as if someone is deliberately trying to break him mentally. Exhausted, starving, and terrified, Eric finally breaks down and begins begging out loud, "Whoever you are, please let me leave." But once again, the ship responds only with silence. Completely exhausted and desperate, Eric tries to survive inside the flooded bathroom. Hunger and thirst begin to weaken him, and with no other option, he drinks the little water left from the shower. But that doesn't last long. Soon, the water is gone. When he tries drinking from the sink, the taste suddenly changes. Now, it tastes salty. That's when Eric realizes something terrifying. Seawater has started leaking into the ship, which means the vessel is slowly sinking. Panic spreads through his mind. If the ship sinks while he's locked inside, he'll drown with it. He tries again and again to open the door, but it remains sealed from the outside.
Who do you think is messing with him? Let's find out.
It's as if some unseen force is deliberately trapping him. As night approaches, the water level continues to rise. Exhausted and hopeless, Eric eventually passes out. During the night, a violent storm hits the ocean. Massive waves shake the ship violently, throwing Eric around inside the small room and leaving him with several new injuries. When morning arrives and Eric wakes up, the water has almost reached his face, just a few more inches, and he would drown. But suddenly he hears something strange, a soft clicking sound. The same mysterious sound he had heard before. Slowly, he turns the door handle. This time, the door opens. The pressure of the water behind it bursts the door open completely, and the powerful rush of water pushes Eric out of the room, giving him a chance to escape. Gasping for air, he manages to climb up onto the top deck where he can finally breathe again. By now, Eric is completely convinced that something is terribly wrong with this ship. An invisible and malicious force seems to be controlling everything around him. Both physically and mentally, he is completely broken. Meanwhile, water continues flooding the lower levels of the ship, and it feels like the vessel could sink at any moment. Thinking quickly, Eric decides to build a small raft. He gathers airbags from the ship along with the broken bathroom door and ties them together to create a floating platform. Then he collects food, water, and tools from the ship and places them onto the raft. Without looking back, Eric leaves the cursed vessel behind and begins drifting away across the sea. But after several hours of paddling, he notices something very strange. The large ship he left behind is still right there. He hasn't managed to move very far from it. Even stranger, the ship that seemed ready to sink earlier is still floating perfectly still on the ocean's surface. Eric can't understand it. With that much water inside, the ship should have already sunk. Then another thought crosses his mind. If the ship isn't sinking, maybe it can actually be repaired. So he reluctantly returns to the vessel. First, he fixes the leak where the seawater had been entering. Then he builds a temporary pump using pipes and tools from the ship. Slowly but surely, he pumps the water out. After several hours of hard work, the ship is finally dry again. Eric even repairs other damaged parts of the vessel, hoping everything will work normally now. Once the work is finished, he returns to the radio and calls for help again. But just like before, no one answers. Frustrated and exhausted, Eric goes back to the control room and studies the navigation maps again. He restarts the engine, hoping the ship will finally move. But the ship doesn't move at all, not even an inch. It's as if the ocean itself has glued the vessel to that exact spot. Eric begins to lose all hope. But just then, he notices something in the distance, another ship. Suddenly, a spark of hope returns. He quickly grabs his raft again and begins paddling toward the distant vessel as fast as he can. But then something terrifying happens. The ship suddenly begins moving directly toward him, as if some invisible force is pushing it straight at him. Eric paddles faster and faster, trying to escape. But the large vessel keeps gaining speed. Just seconds before the collision, Eric jumps off the raft into the water and begins swimming desperately toward another small boat he sees drifting farther away. But when he finally reaches the spot, the boat is gone, completely vanished. Now, Eric is certain of one thing. There is something evil connected to that mysterious ship, something that refuses to let him leave.